Welcome to the Opal Foundation series. In this 6-chapter episode, Reframing Personalization, we sat down with Gabe Alonso, dynamic storyteller and marketing thought leader.
Welcome to episode 2 of the Opal Foundation series. Today we're talking to my friend Gabe Alonso. Gabe is the new head of digital platforms and community for the Pepsi Energy portfolio, formerly of Activision and Nike. And we've got a great topic here. So Gabe, welcome to the Opal Foundation series.
Thank you, Jake. It's always a pleasure chatting with you. I'm excited.
All right, good. All right, let's go. Let's dive in, Gabe. I'm really excited to work through this topic of reframing personalization. We know that personalization is a big part of a company's strategy, but as I think we're going to talk about today, that might not be the right approach to personalization. So tell me first and foremost, why are we talking about this? Why is this important to you?
Yeah, sure. So, throughout my career, I've been on the front lines of engaging consumers and communities. I've been at brands that focus solely on content. I've been at one that leveraged technology and algorithms. I've been on another that relied on premium experiences and consumer behaviors. And yet another that is a combination of all the above. So, diverse background. All of it. And really through all of that, I've come to form an opinion that personalization is at its core perfecting relationships at scale. And that's what excites me about it. And now, I'm sure you could argue that a relationship is never perfect, and you can insert your significant other joke here, but I'm not going to do that because I'm recently engaged and I like our relationship as it is.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you. But again, I think that's precisely why I think we need to approach personalization differently.
Okay. Knowing that it's an awareness and a focus of just about every company, hopefully, how do you do it? How do you personalize or reframe personalization?
Sure. So personalization done perfectly is and can be cold, right? It's ones and zeros. It's transactional. It's specifically based off of the action of a consumer, right? And it gets an equal and opposite reaction. But personalization, in my mind, done right and done well, it's about question and answer. It's brimming with energy and experiences and that conversation. But ultimately, the latter, what I just spoke about, is really hard to do because it's art and science. When it's just science, you can blame the computer if it doesn't work or whatever. But when you really have to dig in and emotionally understand your consumer, create the content, make mistakes, and also continue to leverage data and insights, well, there's a whole lot of things that can go wrong within that, within that formula. But there's also a lot that can go right.
Sure. I'm really excited to hear you dive into this more, Gabe, because what's really interesting to me is you said done perfectly is cold, but done right is, and you went into different answers. So I'm looking forward to hearing you clarify the difference between perfect and right, which will be great.
Yep.
So I agree fundamentally with everything you're saying and completely. Let's talk about companies that maybe are doing it great, in your opinion, or doing it right, or doing it well. Who are some of those brands?
Sure. So, there's folks doing it to varying degrees of quality and success, right? I think for me, Amazon is the obvious first example. It's quite utilitarian, but it works because ultimately they're solving a need for their consumer. Save me time and money. It's not fancy, but they get people to their destination quickly, right? And that's personalization that works for them. On the other side of the spectrum, I think, is Nike. And what their consumer wants, right, is to feel stronger, faster, better. And the content and the products that they provide are driven by those athlete insights and come to life in every experience that they create or provide, whether it's at retail, whether it's, .com, social, within their digital products, so their mobile apps, et cetera. And I think one that's kind of in the middle of it all is Spotify. And so Spotify is another great example of how, a brand can use personalization to provide really awesome experiences. But what I like about Spotify is they don't get it right all the time. And that's kind of the beauty of it, right? Like literally the Discover Weekly is about, here are things we think you might like. But because it's music, like you're open to the idea of, frankly, them making the mistake, because that sense of the unknown, frankly, is what makes that piece of content so exciting and also ultimately relevant for me, because I'm going in there. It's personalized based off of my listening habits, but it's also things that I don't know. And, just like any great relationship, spontaneity is the spice of life. And that playlist provides that, but only through knowing you and your habits well.
So, which I think Spotify is such an interesting example that you bring up. And would you agree that there's also a bit of a nuance to that type of business, that you're allowed mistakes in this song? Because I think as a consumer, you don't mind pushing skip on a song that they thought you might like and you don't. Whereas other brands don't necessarily get that hall pass on missteps.
Yeah, and I think, frankly, what you're bringing up is an interesting larger point, where it's like you can make a mistake once.
Yeah.
But if you make the mistake again, then as a consumer, I know you're not listening to me. So if my Discover Weekly put on, I don't know, like some obscure country artist that I'm like, I've never listened to country once in my life, and I, remove it from the playlist, or at least like, say this isn't relevant for me. And then the next week they either have him or her back again, or it's something similar. I'm like, what is going on? Right.
Yeah.
Now what is a kind of a low touch effort on my behalf, I almost have to then listen to other things now to get them to not think about that anymore, right? Or I'm starting to think about my own habits, like, well, where are they getting this from? And you don't want consumers to be confused in that regard, right? Because then it kind of starts to sour the relationship that they have with your product or service.
Totally. Well, so picking up a little bit more on what you're saying there, we all know that companies are smart. We all know companies have their systems to kind of like personalize things. But how can a consumer or a marketing professional, for that matter, how can you analyze a company's effectiveness in personalization without fully getting into their funnel? I mean, is there a way to know that ahead of time, or do you think you kind of just have to get in, and it's maybe that awareness? If you're aware that you're being personalized to, then maybe they're doing it right. What do you think on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's effectively what I was going to say. Like, if you can feel the personalization, then likely, at least in my opinion, my humble opinion, is the brand's likely not doing it right, right? So at the end of the day, you can really only judge personalization for yourself, because again, if they're doing it right, then my experience should be different from yours and from the next person's and from the next person's. Right. And so the ones that do it best make it hardly noticeable, because the content, the experiences, all that stuff just feels right. And they get better and or more relevant over time. And so I imagine, and I've witnessed this firsthand, the more appropriate and relevant your content becomes to a cohort or a segment of consumers, you end up getting those business results long term, right? They retain, or they engage, or they convert, because they know that they're going to come back and get value from that interaction. And if you use personalization to make that more valuable, then, well, they're going to be, it's hook, line, and sinker.
Got it. So what you're saying is fundamentally, it's personalization needs to be a part of it, but it can't be your lead blocker, right?
Yeah. 100% agree with that. Personalization should not be where you start. It should be where you end, once you do a slew of other things to really build up your relationship. Because ultimately, you need to learn what strengthens and evolves that relationship with your consumers. And then personalization becomes the cherry on top. It's about providing that right value add for me over time. The only way a brand's going to know that is if you learn from a series of interactions over time, to then start adding a little bit of your special sauce to make each interaction more valuable.
Thank you for watching this chapter from the Opal Foundation series, Episode 2, Reframing Personalization. For more inspiring stories, please subscribe to the Opal blog.